You're 9 years old. There's a key on a shoelace tucked under your shirt, still warm from your chest. The bus drops you at the corner, and you walk the last stretch alone. You let yourself in. The house is quiet in that specific way an empty house is quiet. No one asks how your day was. No one is watching. You pour the cereal. You start the homework. You turn on the lights yourself, one room at a time, and somewhere in that silence, without anyone teaching you, you learn a lesson that will follow you for 40 years. Nobody clapped, so you learn to keep going without the clap. The world has a tidy word for this: neglect. The forgotten generation. Raised by the television, handed a latchkey, left to figure it out. And there is truth in that. I won't pretend there isn't. But the story stops too early. Because that quiet, unapplauded childhood didn't just leave a wound, it built an engine. Today we're going to look at the psychology of the people raised without applause, and why the absence of praise made you someone who doesn't wait for it. Start with a small thing. You finish something hard. A project, a repair, a problem you cracked at 2 in the morning. And you don't tell anyone. Not out of modesty exactly. It just doesn't occur to you. The doing was the point. The applause would be a strange add-on, like getting a medal for breathing. Watch yourself in a meeting. Someone presents work that's fine, just fine, and the room lights up with praise, and you feel this small private flinch. Not jealousy, something more like confusion. Why does that need so much noise around it? You did 3 harder things this week and mentioned none of them. You know that flinch, don't you? And notice what you do when something breaks. The sink, the car, the spreadsheet, the relationship. You don't post about it. You don't gather a committee. You roll up your sleeves and you fix it. Or you teach yourself how, quietly, the way you taught yourself everything. There was no one to ask back then, so asking never became a reflex. You became the help you were waiting for. Here's the part that surprises people. That's not coldness. That's a measurement system that lives inside you instead of out there. Psychologists call it an internal locus of control. It was named by Julian Rotter decades ago, and it describes where a person believes the steering wheel is. Some people feel life happens to them, pushed around by luck and other people's moods. Others feel the wheel is in their own hands. Gen X as a whole tends to grip that wheel hard, and it makes sense. When you're the kid who comes home to an empty house, you can't outsource much. The wheel was handed to you at 9, so you held it. But there's a deeper mechanism here, and this is where it gets interesting. There's a famous experiment from the 70s. Researchers took kids who already loved drawing and gave some of them a reward for doing it. A little certificate, a gold star. The kids who got rewarded actually drew less afterward, and with less joy. The reward had quietly replaced the love. Psychologists call it the overjustification effect. When you start doing a thing for the clap becomes the reason. And when the clap stops, so do you. Now flip it. What happens to a kid who never got the gold star in the first place? The love stays clean. You drew because drawing felt good. You read the whole encyclopedia because you were curious, not because anyone was checking. Self-determination theory, from the psychologists Desai and Ryan, describes intrinsic motivation as the deepest kind there is, the fuel that comes from inside and doesn't run dry. The generation raised without applause got something accidental and rare. Their motivation never got hijacked by an audience. It stayed intrinsic. It stayed theirs. So no, you're not unmotivated because no one's watching. You might be the only kind of person who works exactly as hard when no one's watching at all. There's something else this silence gave you, and it's easy to mistake for cynicism. You don't trust applause. Not other people's, and not the kind aimed at you. When someone praises you too quickly, too brightly, a little alarm goes off. What do they want? Where's the angle? People call your generation jaded, allergic to hype, hard to sell to. But think about where that came from. You grew up with no one performing approval at you, so you never learned to confuse warmth with sincerity. You can feel the difference between someone who means it and someone who's managing you. That isn't bitterness. That's a finely tuned instrument for detecting performance, built in a house where nobody bothered to perform. Fast forward 30 years and watch how this plays out at work. You're often the most competent person in the building and the least celebrated, and somehow that arrangement suits you fine. You're the one who quietly keeps the whole thing running while the loud ones get the stage. You don't angle for the credit. You don't update everyone on your progress in real time. You just deliver and move on to the next thing, a little baffled that anyone needs a parade for doing their job. And here you are now, in the middle of your life, often holding two generations at once, aging parents who never said the words, and kids who you make very sure hear them. Did you catch that? You break the cycle in one direction. You hand your children the applause you never got, the praise, the attendance at every recital, the "I'm so proud of you," said out loud and often. You give it freely because you know the shape of its absence. You learned to live without the thing, and then you turned around and made sure no one you love ever has to. There is something quietly heroic in that, and almost no one notices. Which, of course, is exactly how you'd want it. Let me sit in the root of this for a second, because it explains so much. Picture the houses these kids grew up in. The divorce rate doubled in a single decade. Both parents working, or one parent doing the job of two. There were no participation trophies, no curated childhoods, no parent narrating your every move with applause. You were, in the kindest possible sense, left alone. And a child left alone has two choices: fall apart or self-parent. Most of you chose the second one without ever knowing you'd chosen. So, you became the adult in the room before you were one. You learned to soothe yourself, feed yourself, judge your own work, set your own bar. You made your own dinner standing at the counter while the streetlights came on. You signed your own permission slips more than once. You became your own porch light, the one left on for no one but you. And here's the cost, because there is one. When you raise yourself, you also learn that needing people is dangerous. Asking for help feels like admitting the system failed. Receiving a compliment makes your skin itch, so you deflect it. You make a joke. You change the subject. Someone says "I'm proud of you," and you genuinely don't know where to put it. It doesn't compute. There's no slot for it. You say thanks, too fast. And you look at the floor, and you wait for the moment to pass like weather. That's the shadow side of the gift. Independence that started as survival can quietly turn into a wall. And maybe nobody ever told you the difference. So let me. Because here's where it gets complicated and honest. There's a version of this that hardens into something lonely. Where "I don't need anyone" becomes "I won't let anyone in." Where self-reliance becomes a refusal to ever be held. The research on self-esteem makes a distinction worth knowing. Some people's worth is contingent, propped up on the next bit of approval, the next gold star, always one cold shoulder away from collapse. And some people carry a quieter, sturdier sense of worth that doesn't flinch when the room goes silent. You have the second kind. That's real strength. But strength that never lets itself rest is just survival wearing a nicer coat. So the work, if there is any, isn't to become more independent. You've maxed that out. The work is to let one or two people see the house with the lights on. To practice the unbearable sentence, "I could use a hand." Not because you can't do it alone. You proved that at 9. But because doing it alone forever was never the prize. It was just the only option you had. And you have more options now. So let me say the thing no one said when you walked into that quiet house. You were not forgotten. You were not unloved because the praise didn't come. The applause was missing, yes, and that absence shaped you, but look at what it shaped. It built a person whose worth doesn't shake when the room stays quiet. Who doesn't perform for a crowd because you were never given one, and you found out you didn't need one. You became the rarest thing in a world starving for validation. You became someone who already knows the work was good because you were there, and you saw it through. That quiet house didn't take something from you. It gave you the one thing nobody can ever take back. You don't need the room to clap. You never did. You learned to turn on your own lights, in your own silence, and they have stayed on this whole time. Most people are still standing outside, waiting for a porch light someone else has to switch on. You walked in and lit the house yourself. So here's what I want from you. Tell me about the empty house you came home to, the one that made you who you are. And tell me which part of this felt like it was finally putting words to something you've carried alone. Leave it in the comments. I read them, all of them. The clap was never coming. You stopped waiting and built a life anyway. That's not the generation that got left behind. That's the one that learned to stand on its own without ever needing to lean. Subscribe to keep decoding yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.